The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. The 7 habits in this book will help you move from a state of dependence to independence and finally to interdependence. While society and most of the self-help books on the market champion independence as the highest achievement, Covey argues that it's interdependence that yields the greatest results. Interdependence is a more mature, advanced concept which precludes the knowledge that although you are an independent being, working with others will produce better results than working on your own. The book opens with an explanation of how many people with a high degree of outward success still find themselves struggling with an inner need for developing personal effectiveness and growing healthy relationships with other people. The author believes that the way we see the world is entirely based on our own perceptions, and in order to change a certain situation, we must change ourselves, and in order to do so, we must be able to change our perceptions first. While studying over 200 years of literature on the concept of success, he discovered a very important change in the way that humans have defined success over time. In earlier times, before World War I, success was attributed to ethics of character. This included characteristics such as humility, fidelity, integrity, courage, and justice. But after the war ended, there was a shift he refers to as personality ethic, where success is a function of personality, public image, attitudes, and behaviors. These days, people ask for quick fixes, so when they see a successful person, team, or organization, they tend to ask about the ways their job is done and if they could teach them. However, these shortcuts that we tend to ask for, hoping we would save time and effort, yet still achieve the desired result, are simply band-aids that will yield a short-term solution, and they don't address the underlying solution. That's where the 7 habits of highly effective people come in. So let's see what they can teach us. Habit 1. Be proactive. The first and most fundamental habit of an effective person is to be proactive. More than just taking the initiative, being proactive means taking responsibility for your life. Consequently, you don't blame your behavior on external factors such as circumstances, but own it as part of a conscious choice based on your values. Reactive people take a passive attitude towards the world, so they tend to say things like, "There's nothing I can do," or "That's just the way I am." They think the problem is out there, and they don't realize that these thoughts are actually the problem. As reactivity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, the reactive people feel victimized, being more and more helpless and out of control. While reactive people are driven by feelings, proactive people are driven by values, so they recognize that they have a responsibility, or as the author likes to say, responsibility, to choose the way they respond to a given situation. He says that in order to be proactive, we should focus on a circle of influence that lies within our circle of concern, which means that we should work on the things that we can do something about, because as we focus on the positive energy we generate, our circle of influence grows. There's 2 key lessons from which we can learn here. First, start replacing reactive language with proactive language. And second, convert reactive tasks into proactive ones. Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. In this part, Covey teaches us to always start with a clear destination in mind. He encourages us to use our imagination to develop a vision of what we want to become and use our conscience to decide what values will guide us. To better understand this habit, he invites you to imagine your funeral. He asks you to think about things like the way you would like your loved ones to remember you, what you would like them to acknowledge as your achievements, and to consider what a difference you made in their lives. Most of us find it easy to keep ourselves busy by working hard for achieving our goals like promotions, higher income, more recognition, etc. But we rarely stop to evaluate the meaning behind the busyness and achievements. So when you think of it, we pretty much never ask ourselves whether these things that we focus on so intentionally are actually the things that matter to us. Habit 2 suggests that we should always begin with the end in mind, and this applies to everything we do. Starting with a clear destination in your mind allows you to always make sure that the steps you're taking are going in the right direction. He emphasizes that self-awareness is what empowers us to shape our own lives instead of living them by default or based on standards and preferences of others. In the end, you are the one living your life and not others, so why focus on their rules when you can have your own? By making principles the center of your life, you create a solid foundation from which you flourish. Being in the end in mind is one of the crucial things in business. Think of it this way: being a manager requires you to focus on optimizing for efficiency, whereas being a leader is about setting the right strategic vision for your organization in the first place by asking about the thing you are trying to accomplish. So before we begin to create and achieve goals, whether as an individual or as an organization, we must be able to define our values. Rescripting, according to Covey, is the act of intentionally writing new scripts based on your own values in order to change ineffective ones that have been written for you. It is also important to identify our center because whatever the center is, it will be the source of our security, guidance, wisdom, and power. However, he also notes that none of these centers are optimal and that instead we should strive to be principle-centered. We should identify the timeless, unchanging principles by which we must live our lives, because this will give us the guidance that we need to align our behaviors with our beliefs and values. So, 3 key lessons we learned from this chapter are: visualize your own funeral in rich detail, break down different roles in your life, whether professional, personal, or community, and list 3 to 5 goals you want to achieve for each, and define what scares you. Habit 3. Put first things first. In the beginning of this chapter, the author asks you to answer a couple of questions. First, what one thing could you do regularly that you aren't currently doing that would improve your personal life? And second, similarly, what one thing could you do to improve your business or professional life? While habit number 1 encourages you to realize that you are in charge of your own life, and habit number 2 is based on your ability to visualize in order to identify your key values, habit number 3 is the implementation of these 2 habits. It focuses on actually going after these goals and executing on our priorities on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. It focuses on the practice of effective self-management through independent will. And by asking yourself these questions, you become aware that you have the power to significantly change your life in the present. Having independent will results in your capability to make decisions and act on them, and the frequency of you using your will depends on your integrity, which is related to how much you value yourself and how well you keep your commitments. Habit 3 teaches us to prioritize these commitments and put the most important things first, which means we must learn to say no to things that don't match our guiding principles. According to this habit, in order to manage your time accordingly, your actions must adhere to a few things. They must be principle-centered. They must be conscience-directed, meaning that they give you the opportunity to organize your life in accordance with your core values. They define your key mission, which includes your values and long-term goals. They give balance to your life, and they are organized weekly with daily adaptations as needed. What connects these 5 points together is that the focus should be on improving relationships and results instead on maximizing your time. Habit 4. Think win-win. The author argues about the win-win being a philosophy of human interaction rather than being a technique. He says that it's a frame of mind that seeks out a mutual benefit for all concerned, which means that all agreements and solutions are mutually beneficial, so all parties feel satisfied with the outcome. This kind of thinking requires a cooperative rather than competitive attitude toward life. Therefore, anything less than a win-win outcome goes against the pursuit of interdependence, which is the most efficient state to be operating within. That's why you must cultivate the habit of interpersonal relationships in order to adopt a win-win mindset. That requires practicing self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will when interacting with others. The author argues that in order to become a successful leader, you must embrace 5 independent dimensions. First, character, as a foundation upon which a win-win mentality is created, which means you have to act with integrity, maturity, and adopt the abundance mentality. Second, relationships. Since trust is essential to achieving win-win agreements, you must nourish your relationships in order to maintain a high level of trust. Third, agreements, meaning that all parties involved must agree on the desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, as well as the consequences. Fourth, win-win performance agreements and supportive systems means you must create a standardized, agreed-upon set of desired results to measure performance within a system that can support a win-win mindset. And fifth, processes. All processes must allow for win-win solutions to arise. So, 3 key lessons to get you to start thinking win-win would be: first, think about an upcoming interaction where you'll be attempting to reach an agreement or solution. Write down a list of what the other person is looking for, and then write a list next to that of how you can make an offer to meet those needs. Second, identify 3 important relationships in your life. Think about what you feel the balance is in each of those relationships. Do you give more than you take? Take more than you give? Write down 10 ways to always give more than you take with each one. And third, deeply consider your own interaction tendencies. Are they win-lose? How does that affect your interactions with others? Can you identify the source of that approach? Determine whether or not this approach serves you well in your relationships. Write all of this down. Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Before we can offer advice, suggest solutions, or effectively interact with another person in any way, we must seek to deeply understand them in their perspective through empathetic listening. The ability to communicate clearly is essential for your overall effectiveness, as it's the most important skill you can train. He states that while you spend years learning to read, write, and speak, very little focus goes to training the skill of listening. So, if your principles are solid, you'll naturally want to engage and listen to people without making them feel manipulated. Consequently, it's through your character that you transmit and communicate what type of a person you are. We can't simply use one technique to understand someone. In fact, if a person senses that we're manipulating her, she will question our motives and will no longer feel safe opening up to us. He argues that most people listen with the intent to reply, not to understand, and that they're either speaking or preparing to speak at any given moment. So he points out a few things that communication experts estimate, like that only 10% of our communication is represented by our words, whereas 30% is represented by our sounds, and 60% is represented by our body language. There are 4 ways we tend to respond when we listen with our own perspective as a frame of reference. We either evaluate, so we simply agree or disagree. We frequently tend to probe, so we would ask questions from our own frame of reference. We sometimes advise, again from our own experience. Or we interpret, by trying to figure out the person's motives and behavior based on our own motives and behavior. But if we replace these types of responses with empathetic listening, we'll see a significant change by improving our communication skills. An empathetic listener can get into the frame of reference of the person speaking. By doing so, they see the world as they do and feel things the way they feel. Empathetic listening, therefore, allows you to get a clearer picture of reality. When you begin to listen to people with the intent of understanding them, you'll be astounded at how quickly they will open up. By using what you've learned from empathetic listening, you can communicate your ideas in accordance with your listeners' paradigms and concerns. This increases the credibility of your ideas, as you will be speaking in the same language as your audience. Habit 6. Synergize. By understanding and valuing the differences in another person's perspective, we have the opportunity to create synergy, which allows us to uncover new possibilities through openness and creativity. When synergy is operating at its fullest, it incorporates the desire to reach win-win agreements with empathetic communication, and it's the essence of principle-centered leadership which unifies and unleashes great power from people, as it's based on the tenet that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Applying concepts of synergetic creative cooperation in social interaction is very challenging. The author argues how instances of synergetic interpersonal group collaboration are often neglected but should be part of your daily life. At its core, synergy is a creative process that requires vulnerability, openness, and communication. It entails finding a way to reconcile the mental, emotional, and psychological variances within a group of people, while also fostering new paradigms of thought among the group members, and that's where creativity reaches its highest potential. Synergy is effective as an interdependent reality which involves teamwork, team building, and the creation of unity with other human beings. This chapter teaches us 2 key techniques. First, make a list of people who irritate you, then choose just one person. Try to notice the way their views are different. Put yourself in their shoes for 1 minute. Think and pretend how it feels to be them. Does this help you understand them better? So next time you're in disagreement with the person, try to understand their concerns and why they disagree with you. The better you can understand them, the easier it will be to change their mind or change yours. Second, make a list of people with whom you get along well, then choose just one person. Think about the way their views are different, then write down a situation where you had excellent teamwork and synergy and explain why. What conditions were met to reach such fluidity in your interactions? How can you recreate those conditions again? Habit 7. Sharpen the saw. In the last chapter, the author explains that in order to be effective, we must devote the time to renewing ourselves physically, spiritually, mentally, and socially, because continuous renewal allows us to synergistically increase our ability to practice each habit. So the last habit we must learn is to sharpen the saw. It surrounds all of the other habits and makes each one possible by preserving and enhancing your greatest asset, yourself. He teaches us that there are 4 dimensions of our nature, and each must be exercised regularly and in balanced ways. First, physical, which is based around exercise, nutrition, and time management, meaning you must take care of your physical body by eating right, getting enough sleep, and exercising regularly. Second, social and emotional, which says that the goal of renewing ourselves socially is to develop meaningful relationships. Third, spiritual, by practicing daily meditation, communicating with nature, and immersing yourself in a great literature of music helps you get closer to your center in your inner value system. And fourth, mental, which states that the goal of renewing our mental health is to continue expanding our mind, and the way to achieve this is by visualizing, reading, planning, and writing. Key lessons we can learn from this chapter are: first, make a list of activities that will help you renew yourself along each of the 4 dimensions. Select one activity for each dimension and list it as a goal for the coming week. At the end of the week, evaluate your performance. What led you to succeed or fail to accomplish each goal? And second, commit to writing down a specific sharpen the saw activity in all 4 dimensions every week to do them and to evaluate your performance and results. This brings us to the end of today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to click that bell button so you can get notified whenever we have a new book summary ready for you. See you soon!